Good afternoon, everyone. If you're here for the Safe States Advocacy webinar, you're in the right place. We're giving everyone just another minute or two to log in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. While people are still trickling in, if you want to go ahead, for those of you that are here, add your name and the state you are joining us from. That'll help us all get to know a little bit who's in the session with us together. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll welcome new friends as they join us. Good afternoon from where I'm sitting. Welcome, everyone. Great to be here today. I'm Sharon Gilmartin. I'm the Executive Director of the Safe States Alliance and really excited to spend the next hour with you all. Again, for those who are just joining, if you can drop your name and state in the chat, that would be great. Shortly, I'm going to hand it over to Paul Bonta, who is very excited to provide you with timely updates about what's going on at the federal landscape and share what we're seeing and hearing and just help everybody understand what it means for your programs and your funding and ways that you can engage. But before I hand it over to Paul, I did first want to just thank all of you. For your continued advocacy and for showing up and really being consistent in what continues to be an uncertain environment. We're seeing strong bipartisan recognition of the importance of this work, and that really is a testament to the advocacy that you all are undertaking and the ways that you all are continuing to educate our lawmakers about the value and the impact of this work. So, a very sincere thank you from me to all of you. So again, we're here today, share the most up-to-date information, make sure everybody understands what's happening behind the scenes, and leave plenty of time for Q&A so that you're able to really get a sense of what's going on and be sure to get all of your questions answered. So without further ado, I will hand this over to Paul Bonta for the FY27 appropriations update. Again, if you're just joining, please pop your name and your state in the chat. And thank you all for being here. Paul.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you all for taking the time to join today's webinar. I will just share a few slides about the FY 2027 appropriations process to just give you a quick update on where things stand. So overall funding for the CDC Injury Center stands at $761 million. That is the current level of funding to support all Injury Center funded programs. And that is the level of funding that the Injury Center has received over the past several years. The Congressional Appropriations Process kicks off every year, typically when the president submits his budget request to Congress. This year, the president submitted his budget request for fiscal year 2027 and proposed to eliminate all funding for the CDC Injury Center, which is similar, or I should say identical, to what we saw in the president's budget request for fiscal year 2026. I think you all are well aware that last year, this community successfully fought back on the president's proposal last year to eliminate all funding for injury center funded programs. So we are redoubling our efforts to push back once again on the president's proposal, as I said, for fiscal year 2027 to eliminate the injury center. There is, however, a bit of good news. I'll share that the House Appropriations Committee, not the full House, but the House Appropriations Committee, recently met to consider its appropriations bill that funds the CDC, and that's the appropriations bill for the Departments of Labor, Health and Human Services, and Education. And so when they met to consider that appropriations bill, what they did is they actually approved their version of the bill that provides $705 million for injury center programs. Now, while yes, that is not the 761 million that we all need to see, I do want to note that the 705 million that the House Appropriations Committee approved is about $40 million higher than what the committee approved last year. So last year, when the House Appropriations Committee met, they approved only $665 million to support injury center funded programs. And so it's great to see that lawmakers are recognizing the value and the impact of these programs, and this year chose to allocate an additional 40 million to the injury center. Over on the Senate side, there's been very little movement on any appropriation bills thus far. Appropriation leaders in the Senate have been unable to negotiate what are called top line spending levels for the various different appropriation bills that need to move in order to fund all government agencies. And given that we're just about midway through July with no progress announced on the Senate side, and since lawmakers will be out for the August congressional recess, and since this is a midterm election year, it's pretty much well known at this point that there will be no additional appropriations movement in Congress until after the midterm elections. Congress is just simply running out of time in order to finalize all the work that still remains, in order for them to complete the work and the negotiations necessary to finalize that appropriations bill for the Departments of Labor, Health and Human Services, and Education. So what that means is, yes, by the end of September, before the new fiscal year starts on October 1, Congress will have to pass a continuing resolution in order to continue to fund government agencies at their current levels and buy themselves additional time in order to complete the various different appropriation bills that need to be passed by the start of the fiscal year. So obviously, as this process continues to advance, we will keep all of you informed of what we see coming out of the Senate. But I just want to remind everyone that, as I said, while last year the House Appropriations Committee only approved 665 million for the injury center, it was Senate appropriators that crafted an appropriations bill for the CDC that fully funded all programs within the injury center's jurisdiction. So we are in close communications with our champions in the Senate. We, at this point, fully expect them to again support full funding for the CDC Injury Center, but we just simply won't know until the Senate Appropriations Committee meets at some point after the August recess, most likely after the November elections, to consider their version of the bill. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Those of you who work on advocacy or if you work in government relations, you are well aware of the federal appropriations process, but I just want to call your attention to that top bar at the top there, the green, the blue, and the orange. And you'll see that the blue portion of the bar, the legislative process, is the largest share of the annual appropriations process, and that's where we are currently. Not only is that where we are currently, but we are fairly early in this appropriations process. As I mentioned, the House Appropriations Committee is the only committee that has taken any action on the House Labor HHS appropriations bill. So there's a lot that needs to happen before this legislation can be enacted into law at the end of the year. And I say at the end of the year because, again, knowing what we know today, which is we're just weeks away from the August congressional recess, and lawmakers are going to be facing their re-elections in early November, this appropriations process will not be finalized until close to, if not perhaps at the very end of this calendar year. So on the next slide, I believe we have a list of the various different programs that are funded at the CDC Injury Center. Now, I know this type is the font is very small. It's hard to see, but we just wanted to give you an idea of the breadth of programs that are funded through the CDC Injury Center. And you can identify those zeros there in the column under the President's budget request for fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 2027. And you'll see that next to those zeros, we've been able to successfully work with members of Congress to restore funding for all of these various different programs, again, that are being funded through the CDC Injury Center. So I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who have engaged with us throughout the appropriations process, to thank all of you who have sent emails to members of your congressional delegation, to thank those of you who have met directly with your Senate offices or your representative's office to really educate them about the value and the impact that CDC Injury Center programs have in the communities that these lawmakers represent. So moving on to our next slide. Finally, we just wanted to highlight members of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee to quickly mention that lawmakers on this committee, senators of this committee, will be meeting on the 15th this week to conduct a confirmation hearing for Dr. Erica Schwartz, who has been nominated to lead the CDC. We put this slide up here because if you have a senator who is a member of the Senate Health Committee, you have an opportunity to submit a proposed question for your senator to ask of Dr. Schwartz. Now, Dr. Schwartz is an MD, MPH physician. Dr. Schwartz is somebody who has served as the Deputy Surgeon General at HHS previously. So somebody who is certainly far more qualified than some of the other failed nominees that have moved through this committee. So we, along with many of our partner organizations, would like to see Dr. Schwartz confirmed, but it is always helpful to have one or more senators ask a question of any CDC nominee about their vision for the CDC Injury Center. We don't want to propose questions that would be difficult or might box in Dr. Schwartz at her nominations hearing. But the value of having a senator ask Dr. Schwartz about the CDC Injury Center is that then indicates to Dr. Schwartz that senators have their eye on the injury center and the programs within their jurisdiction. So let me stop there, and I now want to hand it over to my colleague at Safe States, Claire Ellis, who will talk about the upcoming August month in action. So Claire, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you for that update. I know there's obviously a lot going on right now, and so we're grateful that you all are here joining us. But I am going to talk a little bit more about how you can take action in the month of August, which is really a great time to be reaching out to your members of Congress for a number of reasons. So first, Paul and Sharon touched on it a little bit. We just want to emphasize again how important it is for you all to speak up in support of the Injury Center. We know from years past that advocacy works, and continued advocacy has really been key. As we saw in FY26, the president proposed eliminating the Injury Center, and we saw even a massive cut in the proposed funding amount from the House. But through continued advocacy from you all reaching out to your members of Congress, specifically your senators, and asking them to protect the CDC Injury Center, we saw overall a protection of that top line funding, and that the Injury Center did receive full funding. And we can even see kind of a reflection in that for FY27, in that while the president did propose eliminating the Injury Center again, we saw a smaller cut in Injury Center funding from the House, which can only be because of all of your continued advocacy and really your work to raise the profile of the Injury Center. But we know obviously it's still a cut. And so it's key that we continue to meet with our members of Congress and push them to protect the CDC Injury Center, especially in light of the fact that we are still waiting on a Senate bill. So a great time to be meeting with members of the Senate, especially if you happen to have a senator who sits on the Senate Appropriations Committee, to continue to urge them to prioritize the CDC Injury Center and to protect that funding. In the full amount. The other reason it is a great time to meet with your senator or your representative is because they are home in the month of August. They all come home for the month of August during the August recess to meet with, constituents in the district. A lot of them may be on the campaign trail as well. So really a great time to meet with them. And so we want to urge you all to take time in the month of August to meet with your member of Congress. And while it's a great opportunity, if you are able, we encourage you all to take time to meet with your member in district if possible. Many of them may have an office in your town or city or in a neighboring one or hopefully close by. And it's really a wonderful opportunity to get the chance to meet with them without having to travel to Washington, D.C. They are home to meet with you all. Again, many of them are on the campaign trail, so they may be a little bit more eager to meet with constituents. So really a great time. And we'll have Shelley joining us here in a moment to talk about her experience having an in-district meeting. But we also recognize that may be difficult for larger states. Some of these offices, especially for your senators, may be farther away, or it may require you to take time away from work, or it's August, so you may be enjoying a beach vacation. And so we recognize that may not always be possible. And so if that's the case, we still strongly urge you to meet with your members of Congress and do so virtually. And so really, I think what I want to emphasize here is that as you are beginning to kind of decide how you want to take action in the month of August, when meeting with your members of Congress and their staff, whatever format is easiest for you to schedule is the best format. If you want to do an in-district meeting and if you're able, that's a great way to get in FaceTime to meet some of these staff. A lot of these staffers are living in the communities that you all work in and serve, but also recognizing that there may be some difficulties in doing so. And so scheduling a virtual meeting is still just as effective, just as important. Whatever one you can do is the best meeting. And so we have created a suite of resources for you all as you prepare for your month of action, including a month of action checklist, which Hannah should be dropping the link for you all in the chat. But really, this is kind of a step-by-step checklist to help you prepare for your meetings and determine the best route for meeting with your members of Congress in August. We have some tips and tricks for how you're going to plan and coordinate those meetings. We have, a checklist of how to prepare for your meetings, as well as kind of, I'll touch on it here in a moment, but a sample email as you're reaching out to these members to try to set up meetings that you all can use and tailor to your needs. We have some tricks for you as you're meeting with your congressional offices, as well as some kind of, checklist items after you've met with them to make sure you're following up, answering all of those questions, continuing to urge them to support and prioritize the Injury Center. We also have other resources and tools that as you're meeting with them, as you are reaching out to these offices that you can share, which Hannah should also be dropping the link to. This includes those Injury Center state fact sheets. These are wonderful sources of information for your congressional members and their staff. They give kind of an overall snapshot of what Injury Center funding looks like in your state. Some of them have the map on the back that gives you kind of a more detailed look and can help you identify if there is district level funding that some of your members on the House side may be really interested in. You can also point to the programs that you are working on. So these are really great pieces of information to share to kind of help members of Congress and their staff understand how broad the support your state receives from the Injury Center. We also have a funding request one-pager that you are all welcome to use that talks about needing full funding for the Injury Center for FY27 of that $721 million. I also want to suggest that as you are beginning to decide who you're going to meet with and setting up these meetings, if you all have resources, if you all have one-pagers or brochures or ways to point at the work that you are all working on, certainly also great to share with them. So reaching out. So when it comes to setting up these meetings, it can feel intimidating or you may not necessarily know where to start. But there's really two good places to start when it comes to setting up your meetings with your members of Congress. The first is to reach out to any staff that you have connected with. Have you communicated with this office before? Maybe you attended Hill Day last year or this year. Maybe you've been in district before, really we recommend starting by reaching out to those staffers that you met with. Certainly, if you are planning on doing a virtual meeting, if you are thinking an in-district meeting might be kind of difficult to set up, you're not going to be around, for whatever reason. If you attended Hill Day earlier this year, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to the staffer that you met with earlier and see if you can set up another time to meet with them. It's a great way to reinforce the message, make them more familiar with Safe States, with the Injury Center, certainly with the work that you are doing on the ground. And we know when it comes to the Hill and protecting the Injury Center, those relationships are just so important. And so continuing to foster those, continuing to meet with them and, reminding them how important the Injury Center is to your community, a great way. If you don't have any connections with the Hill, if you've connected with the staffer before and you go to email them and you get a response that they're no longer there, no worries. You can still always reach out to the district and scheduling staff. We have created, like I mentioned, there'll be a link to it in the checklist, kind of a draft email that you can tweak as needed as you're reaching out to your members to set up these meetings. So you can kind of log online and see, I recommend just looking up your member of Congress, seeing who they are, contacting them through. They often have a portal. I also have I've called many offices. If you are unsure of who to reach out to, if you can't find easily online, the district or scheduling staff email, call the office. I have found staffers are eager to help you. Often I think a lot of the staffers are answering the phone are, interns or staff assistants who may not always be getting the happiest or the kindest messages. So when you call and you reach out and you say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm calling because I'm interested in connecting with your health staffer to share more about the Injury Center, do you have their email address? They often will provide it to you, write it down, or their phone number, and then I'll shoot off an email afterwards. So it's really easy to reach out. But as a reminder too, Safe States is always here. So if you start to try to go down those paths and you have trouble finding who you need to reach out to, you can always reach out to Paul or I, and we can help you get connected to the right staffer to set up those meetings. The next thing we want to really encourage you all to do is meet as a group. We recognize that sometimes these meetings can be intimidating, or you may feel only comfortable talking about a small portion of injury and violence prevention, or you may have attended a previous Hill Day and just enjoyed meeting with, a group of advocates. So we really want to strongly encourage you to meet as a group. We know that there are strengths in numbers. It allows you all to kind of divide who's going to talk about what in these meetings. Some people may feel more comfortable making the ask. Some people may feel more comfortable talking about the programs that they're working on. It also allows for a diverse expertise. Some of you are working on programs related to overdose prevention. Others may be doing programming related to drowning prevention. It really allows you to kind of discuss and touch on the broad scope that we know that the Injury Center touches on, and allows as you're meeting with these staffers, as these meeting with these members of Congress, to remind them how important this work is and that it really does touch a lot of lives. Certainly, it may feel more comfortable to meet as a group, and perhaps more importantly, it shows that there's broad support. It's not just one person meeting, but it's a group of constituents who are there to talk about the importance of the Injury Center and remind these staffers that it's important to more than one person. It's important, we know, to large communities, and obviously then in the end can have a greater impact. If you are unsure about, creating a group, if you're not sure who you all can meet with, we are happy to connect you. We are happy to help you connect with advocates. If you have attended Hill Days in the past and you have everyone's email address, would strongly encourage you to shoot everyone an email in your state and go, hey, Team Virginia, would love to get everyone back together and set up some of these meetings. If you have, strong advocates that you're connected with through, other advocacy avenues or through other Safe States membership opportunities, certainly recommend reaching out to them as well. But really kind of meeting as a group, we think can help take the stress out of it, can help, help you plan all and help, just really push the importance of the Injury Center. And as a reminder, as you head into these meetings, we know that they can sometimes feel intimidating, they can sometimes feel scary, but really it's important to remember that it's not that hard, that you are there to talk about what you do every day. You're going to talk about the areas that you know, and you talk about why it's important. As a reminder, a lot of these staffers are not the experts. Many of them hear from, hundreds of constituents. And so they know maybe a little bit about the work, but not a lot about the work that you are doing. And so it's, just what are you doing? What are you working on every day? Why is it important? Certainly, if you have the opportunity to meet with someone in district, whether it be a staffer or your member, they live in these communities that you all are serving. And so that's another great touch point, that as you're meeting with them, as you are discussing, remember that they are benefiting from the work that you are doing. They, recognize the importance of it. And you may have touch points you don't even realize that you have until you were in that office talking with them. And the other thing is, be clear about your ask. Make sure that when you're meeting with members of Congress, when you're meeting with their staff, they want to hear about the issue. They want to hear what you're concerned about. But at the end of the day, they also want to know what they can do for you. What, if you bring them this problem, if you are highlighting an issue, what is it that they can do, which is to fully fund the Injury Center. Something else I want to touch on briefly is as you are preparing for these meetings, I like to do a quick Google search of the member that I'm meeting with. I like to see what, committees that they are sitting on. If they are on the Veterans Affairs Committee and I am doing some work related to veterans, I know that I want to touch on that and that issue because that is something that's very important to the member. Or if they had previously served, certainly something I want to bring up. I would recommend looking to see what committees they are on. Certainly, if they are on the Senate Appropriations Committee, that is not only a great office to meet with, but one where you want to highlight the fact that they can, really it's important that they continue to prioritize the Injury Center as they are undergoing, discussions and negotiations to draft these bills. Certainly look at what caucuses they're on. There is a mental health caucus. There's also an addiction treatment and recovery caucus. See if you are meeting with someone who sits on either of those caucuses. And if you are, and you are happen to be doing work on suicide prevention, or you might be doing work related to ACEs or even overdose prevention, something again to highlight, to emphasize, to make sure that they are aware of, especially again, because you all are doing work in these communities. And I won't necessarily touch on all of this, and we'll be happy to share this with you all as after the webinar. But this is kind of, as you are thinking about how you all want to meet with members and what you want to talk about, this is a great roadmap to consider as you're in these meetings. Obviously, introducing everyone, sharing the work that you are doing, telling them what you are there to talk about, why it's important to the community, followed by the ask. I want to emphasize too, if you are ever asked a question that you don't know the answer to, no worries. You can always tell them you're unsure and you'll follow up with them afterwards, which gives you a great opportunity to thank them again, after the meeting, waiting a day or so, sending any additional information, sharing any additional resources, especially, when you're in these meetings, they may be interested in learning more about the work that you all are doing. And so a great opportunity to share more, potentially inviting them to learn more about the work that you are doing. And as a reminder, we are always here to help. We are very excited about the August month of action. We, want to support you all as you are considering meeting with your members of Congress, as you are looking at kind of, fielding a group of advocates to meet with them either in person or virtually. We want to be as helpful as possible. If you are reaching out to offices and struggling to hear back, please let us know and we will do what we can to help you, set up these meetings. If you are receiving questions that you don't know the answer to, feel free to shoot us an email and we are happy to help. We really, want to make sure that this is doable and accessible for you all, and we are happy to help. And with that, we'll pass it over to Shelley to share her experience doing a district meeting.
Thanks, Claire. I am excited to talk about our experience last year during the August recess. I'd been on several Safe States Hill Day events and things like that. Last year was our very first time ever meeting with someone in district. There were three of us that went. Two of us were Safe State staff, Amy Bailey and myself, and Marianne Contreras was the other person that went. Marianne works for a level 1 trauma center in Fort Worth. I would like to say that, we had reached out to the folks that I met with in Senator Cornyn's office before, but I think I probably emailed Paul or Claire and said, hey, who's the in-district person that we should meet with? Before they could even respond, though, I went on Senator Cornyn's website, and we decided to meet with Senator Cornyn because we have a quarterly meeting in August in Austin every year, and so we were going to be there anyway. But in the time that I went through, was able to go to Senator Cornyn's website. He had a form to fill out, so we had to fill that out. So you might check first to see if your congressional leader has one of those forms that allows you to set up appointments and things like that. We just met with Senator Cornyn's office in Austin. We didn't meet with anyone. Marianne and I are both in the DFW area. Amy's more in the Austin area. But because we were in Austin, we just met with Senator Cornyn's office. It was, for those who have been on to a Hill Day in DC, you will know that likely there are 5 groups deep waiting to visit with the staff and things like that. It was a completely different experience locally. I think we were probably we had a morning meeting. I think we were the only ones that had that morning meeting. We weren't rushing to try and get through, our little elevator speech or anything like that. The staffers, we were there at least an hour, maybe a little bit more. Um, and they asked a lot of questions. Now, we did come prepared with materials because this was August last year, and we were still very focused on trying to save the CDC Injury Center and everything. So we came prepared with all the Safe States materials that talked about all the things that the CDC Injury Center does and things like that. That was mostly my role out of the three of us. Mary Ann was able to talk about things that how CDC funding, while her hospital didn't get direct CDC funding, how her hospital and how her injury program was able to benefit from the CDC funding that came to Texas. And Amy was a former employee of the Texas Department of State Health Services, and so she could talk about how CDC funding had benefited them and everything. As always, afterwards, we followed up with emails and thanked the staff for meeting with us. As September rolled around, as some of you may remember, OMB was holding a lot of funds and not releasing funds that were supposed to be released. And so we were able to send emails to Senator Cornyn's, the staff that we met with in Austin, letting them know what was going on. They responded immediately to us, said we will make Senator Cornyn aware of this. And then later, once the funds got released, and once we heard that states had received their core SIP funding and things like that, as we were going down to the wire, Safe States still had not received our notice of award about our funding. And so I shot off an email to Senator Cornyn's staff in the local office and said, hey, we are just days away from this funding ending. Safe States is important to our members and the resources that we provide. And again, I got an immediate response. Shelley, we will check on this immediately. I don't know if they did anything, but it was just nice knowing that they were responsive. I think when we were there, when they found out that Mary Ann worked for a level 1 trauma center, there were a lot of questions about the TV show The Pit, which we probably spent 5 to 10 minutes just talking about that and them asking Mary Ann how realistic it was, things like that. So, we just had an opportunity to create to build some trust and create some relationships that we hadn't, it was easier to do that than in the 5 or 10 minutes that we typically have for a Washington, D.C. meeting. This year, I've already sent out emails to folks in the DFW area, trying to set up at least a couple of meetings. Probably not going to be on the same day. We're going to be back in Austin at the end of August, so we'll try and set up some Austin meetings as well. And then we're also just talking to some of our other colleagues in Texas about setting up some virtual meetings, maybe some of the folks in the Houston area. So I would highly recommend it. It was satisfying. It was fun. And, I think Safe States is, as Claire and Paul and Sharon have all mentioned, we've got the resources and many of us would love to help you all out. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Claire.
Thank you, Shelley. Great to hear about your experience. It sounds wonderful. And we know, obviously, there are great benefits to meeting in district. So I wanted now to turn it all to questions. I see we have a couple in the Q&A box. Please feel free, if you have any more, to drop them in the Q&A box, or you may be able to raise your hand. We're happy to answer them. The first one I want to flag, I think, for Paul. It's for Wisconsin, but I think for anyone listening, Rebecca has said she would like to ask that Senator Baldwin ask the CDC nominees, ask for the CDC's nominees' vision for the CDC Injury Center. But how does she do that? Does she call the switchboard? What is the best route for that?
So, yeah, thanks, Rebecca, for your question. And I just sent you an email with the appropriate contact information for Senator Baldwin's office. So if any of you have a similar question, please feel free to email me or Claire directly. Or as Claire said, you can simply call the office directly and let them know that you need the contact information for the person who handles CDC issues. So that's the easiest and quickest way to identify the appropriate staff contact in either of your senators or in your representative's office.
Yes, and it really does only take about 5 minutes. They are often very happy to provide that information to you. The other question I see, which I'm happy to answer, and Paul, if you have anything, or Shelley, you have anything to add, is are they interested in personal stories of survivorship or just this is what I do for a living type of conversation? I feel perhaps personal experiences could be helpful, plus professional efforts and impacts on communities could be a good combo. Personal stories are great. I think they are really, if you have the opportunity, if you have, examples to share, those are really key. When it comes to meeting with members at the end of the day, they want to know what is this program doing? What are the impacts? I think often, if Paul and I have had several meetings related to the National Violent Death Reporting System, which at the end of the day is a data set. And so I think when you can explain to them why it's important, share real world experiences, let them know that, yes, it is a violent death reporting system, but what does that mean in practice? What kind of benefits? Here are key examples that, NVDRS, we have used one several times where in Michigan, they saw that there was a spike in suicides for service members who were going out and hunting and fishing. And so they added the 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline number to hunting and fishing licenses because they saw that on the NVDRS dashboard. They found that out via violent death reporting data. And that really resounds with these staffers. It helps them understand the importance of why they, got to continue to prioritize funding for the injury center. So I want to see if there are any other questions from anyone.
And Claire, I'll just add that we all know how important data is. We all know how important surveillance programs are. But when you're meeting with policymakers and when you're meeting with their staff, I've often said that there is a very strong and real emotional component to the policymaking process, which is why these stories truly are critically important. Yes, we know the data matters, the data are important, but stories are even more important. And so to the extent that you can relay a story about a program that you work on, a story that relays the impact and the benefit that a program has had, oftentimes that's exactly the type of information that will pique a lawmaker or their staff's interest and then ask you for more follow-up information.
Shelley?
Yeah, I would just add that last year when we were meeting with Senator Cornyn's office, Senator Cornyn had been tapped to be one of the leaders for the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act following the Uvalde elementary school shooting. And that was one of the first things that we talked about with his staff, is thanking him to be sure and thank him for that, acknowledging his role and that it must have been difficult for him because it's Texas and it's a red state and things like that. So would highly encourage you to also be sure to say thanks for things that they've done. The other thing is that because we had met with Senator Cornyn's staff in D.C. for several years, we also knew that he had an interest in suicide prevention and particularly veteran suicide. And so we brought that up during the meeting as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just as a reminder, those touch points can be hugely important, and you may not even in the moment until you're talking with staff. I know I've been in meetings where, for example, Senator Booker has a strong connection to elder adult falls prevention, but we didn't learn that until we were in the meeting. So certainly some things to take note of. Ask the staffer or the member that you're meeting with, if they, kind of if they have any questions, they may often be willing to kind of share this information with you at those times. So really just encourage you to take some moments, not very long, a couple of minutes to Google these members that you're meeting with and see if there's any information you can find on them. And then just make sure, as you're meeting with them, taking note if there's any, touch points that they may have. But I want to see if there are any other questions. If not, we can wrap early. I want to thank you all so much for joining us. And again, encourage you all to email Paul or I with any questions as we get working on August in Action. We will be sharing more information as we get closer to the beginning of August with you all. I'm working to help connect you with other advocates in your state so that as you are setting up these meetings, you have others to meet with. And really want to thank you all again for your continued advocacy and support for the CDC Injury Center. We know how important it is. We know without it, we would not be where we're at now, but we know that we have to continue to advocate for and prioritize the Injury Center to ensure that we see full and level funding again for FY27.